Today, we're diving into a wild story about high finance, state-sponsored crime, and, believe it or not, the birth of an empire. And it's a story that starts not in some stuffy boardroom, but right on the high seas.
It really sounds like something out of a movie, right? But what if the foundations of modern corporate finance, and yeah, the British Empire itself, were actually kickstarted by one single, insanely successful pirate raid? Because that's exactly what this is. It's the story of a queen, Queen Elizabeth I, who was kind of strapped for cash, making a huge bet on a brilliant sailor named Francis Drake. And that bet? Well, it didn't just pay off. It literally changed the world.
Okay, so to really get why England would even think about turning to piracy, you have to picture the world map back in the 16th century. And on that map, one empire's shadow just loomed over everything else.
You know, Spain had an absolute chokehold on the Americas. All the gold, the silver, these unimaginable resources were just flooding into their treasury, making them the undisputed global superpower. So for a small kind of isolated island nation like England, things were looking, well, pretty bleak. This quote really nails the Spanish mindset at the time. The New World wasn't just a colony, they saw it as the personal property of the King of Spain. No trespassing allowed. And they had the Navy to back that up. So how in the world could a smaller nation like England ever hope to compete?
Well, England's answer wasn't to try and build a bigger navy, at least not right away. No, their answer was to invest in the startup, a very, very aggressive, high-risk start.
So the whole relationship really started with a conflict. After a nasty Spanish attack at San Juan de Ulloa, English sailors like Francis Drake basically adopted this unofficial policy. Beyond a certain line in the Atlantic, all bets were off. Drake's raid in '72 was just pure piracy, but his huge voyage from 1577, that was something else. It was this incredibly audacious plan to hit the Spanish where they would never expect it, on their supposedly secure Pacific coast.
And the result of that voyage was just staggering. Drake came back to England with a haul of Spanish treasure so huge that the return on investment for his backers was an almost unbelievable 4,700%. I mean, to put that in perspective, that's like turning a $10,000 investment into almost $500,000.
And here is the absolute kicker. The lead investor in this whole thing was none other than Queen Elizabeth I herself. She'd secretly backed the voyage, and her cut of the plunder was so massive it reportedly allowed her to pay off England's entire national debt. Just gone. Overnight, England went from being deep in the red to having this massive surplus of what we'd now call venture capital. A pirate's treasure chest literally became the nation's seed fund. Okay, so Drake's raid brings in this massive injection of cash, but a one-off pirate score, no matter how huge, isn't really a sustainable economic model, right? To scale up their ambitions, to go from just plundering to global trade and colonization, they needed a new kind of financial technology.
And that technology was the joint stock company. The idea was actually pretty simple, but it was revolutionary. Instead of one super wealthy person having to fund a whole risky voyage, you could sell shares to hundreds or even thousands of investors. They were called adventurers, which is a pretty cool title. This spread the risk around and let them pool together just massive amounts of capital.
Let's just put this into perspective for a second. Sir Walter Raleigh, a single, very rich guy, tried to fund a colony all by himself. And the result was the famous lost colony of Roanoke, a total failure. But then you have the Virginia Company, a joint stock venture. They pooled enough capital from over 1,600 adventurers to fund multiple supply missions, and that's what ensured the survival of Jamestown, the first permanent English settlement in North America. See the difference?
And this model didn't just stay in the Americas. It absolutely exploded all over the globe. Pretty soon you had companies being chartered to monopolize trade with the Ottoman Empire, to push into India, and to colonize even more of the Americas. The joint stock company became the engine that was driving English expansion all over the map.
So, let's connect the dots here. We've got this massive pile of pirate cash, and we have a brand new corporate structure to put it to work. This is the moment where state-sponsored plunder really starts to evolve into a full-blown empire. You can actually see this clear progression. It starts with a very direct, violent seizure of wealth, smash and grab. Then it gets more systematic through these chartered companies that control the trade routes. And finally, it evolves into colonial production, where the companies aren't just trading goods anymore. They are directly controlling the land and the labor that produce them. Historians actually have a name for this whole process. It's called primitive accumulation.
It's that foundational stage of capitalism where the state actively uses its power, its army, its laws, its royal charters, to help private companies accumulate a ton of wealth, often through some really violent and coercive means like piracy, monopolies, and colonization.
And the political ideology that kind of justified all of this was known as mercantilism. You can almost think of it as the operating system for primitive accumulation. It was a system where the state and big business were in this really tight alliance, both believing that national power was a direct result of national wealth, and that you should acquire that wealth by any means necessary.
Okay, so let's bring all this home, because this isn't just a history lesson, right? This whole story of pirates and queens actually holds some really timeless lessons about investment, innovation, and power.
First off, Drake's Voyage is a masterclass in how asymmetric bets, these high-risk ventures with the potential for massive payoffs, can be totally transformative. And that's especially true when they're backed by a powerful sponsor, like the Queen, who can not only share the risk, but also protect the whole venture and make its profits legitimate.
Second, we always think of innovation in terms of new tech, a new machine or gadget. But financial innovation can be just as disruptive, if not more so. The ability to pool capital and spread risk through the joint stock company completely changed what was even possible for a nation to achieve. It was revolutionary.
And finally, this entire era just shows the explosive power of that partnership between the state and private money. When a government lines up its foreign policy and its military power with commercial interests, it can create this feedback loop that just projects power and generates wealth on a truly global scale.
So, when you step back and look at the whole picture, the takeaway is pretty clear. The path from a minor kingdom to a global empire, well, it wasn't exactly paved with good intentions. It was funded by a pirate's treasure, it was built with a new corporate tool, and it was powered by a ruthless partnership between the state and the market.
And that kind of leaves us with a really provocative thought, doesn't it? When we look at today's venture capitalists who are funding disruptive, and let's be honest, sometimes destructive new technologies, are they really all that different from Queen Elizabeth and those adventurers who bought shares in piracy, colonization, and empire? What kind of treasure maps are we drawing today?